What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikiPikaPapa, and as I've been doing a lot of my end of the year research where I'm looking at where Scarlet and Violet is right now, I'm trying to understand what 2025 has in store for us. I've been reflecting on what happened in Sword and Shield at the same period of time that we're at right now in Scarlet and Violet, and I think it is a really cool comparison, and it goes to show you that the market is in a very different place right now, and different isn't bad, different isn't good. You know, if you invest in cards long enough like I have, you're going to understand that the market is always going through a different cycle. Sometimes it's more frothy, sometimes it's more favorable to buy into, but the market goes through cycles, and what we're going through right now I think is really exciting. Obviously, I have highlighted here all of the booster box prices at the end of December for all of the Scarlet and Violet era booster boxes, and there's some pretty strong prices in there, and we're going to compare them to some Sword and Shield booster boxes here in a minute. But you know, I think what's really interesting too, and what I'm so glad I started doing back in the middle of 2021 is I have been warehousing the end of month booster box prices for Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet era, like I said, all the way since middle of 2021. And what that allows us to do is that allows us to look backwards in time, back into the Sword and Shield era and say, hey, listen, we're at the end of year 2 in Scarlet and Violet. Where were some of these booster boxes at the end of year 2 in the Sword and Shield era? I always say, listen, I love TCG player information. I use it all the time. I use their graphs. I think it is a great representation of the here and now. But again, it only goes back 1 year. If you are only looking at the last year's worth of performance, in a lot of cases, that's like reading the last chapter of a book. Or for some of these, it's like reading the last couple pages of the last chapter of the book, right? Like you don't get the complete story. You don't understand what has happened over. You're missing the body. You're missing all the excitement. Like you're missing the buildup. So I'm really happy that we started that journey all those years ago here on the channel of warehousing the data, because we can look at it. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to have a really fun comparison of where Scarlet and Violet is at the end of year 2. We're going to look at where Sword and Shield was at the end of year 2. And remember, we had Chilling Reign, we had Evolving Skies, right? We had some really awesome sets that had come out at that point, and we're going to draw some comparisons, and we're going to see what's different, and we're going to talk about, you know, what that might possibly mean. So before we get into all of this data, I've got to do my selfish plug as always. I'm really trying to get to 10,000 subscribers in 2025. So if you find value in this video, if you like what it is and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. Those small things go a long way in helping my small channel out, and I really appreciate it. So with that out of the way, obviously you can see where the booster box prices were for the Scarlet and Violet era at the end of December. Let's take a look at the very next slide, and this shows us where the Sword and Shield booster boxes were at the end of December in 2021. And if you're like me, it's so funny, like we get so focused on the here and now, I forget that Fusion Strike booster boxes way back then were $90. Evolving Skies was $106. Chilling Reign was $92. Battle Styles was in the 80s. It is absolutely crazy to think about these prices for the booster boxes. And then when you look up above and you see Surging Sparks at $215 a booster box, my gosh, you got Twilight Masquerade getting near 160. You got Paldea Evolved just slightly over 160, even Stellar Crown. And Stellar Crown for me, like I love the Squirtle card, love the Bulbasaur card, right? Like I love those in Stellar Crown, but I don't know where Stellar Crown's going to end up. But even with all of that, we have some really strong booster box prices. And one of the interesting things to me versus back then is we also have a lot of these that are already sold out on the Pokemon Center, right? The first 4 sets from the Scarlet and Violet era are all sold out. Surging Sparks obviously is for now. I don't know. I feel pretty confident they're going to release more out into the hobby. I don't know when, where, how, or why, but I certainly feel like they will. So I think that will flip to back in stock. But people are so feverish about this set. As soon as it shows back in stock, people are going to just buy it out all over again. Like this set is going to remain sold out. I have a strong feeling, unless they somehow just flood the market and outpace the demand, but I don't think that's going to happen. And then when you look at the Sword and Shield era, I mean, my gosh, you can still buy Vivid Voltage and Battle Styles at MSRP on the Pokemon Center today. All these years later, you can still buy them on the Pokemon Center. Now, there is something you need to understand with that. If you weren't collecting back then, obviously we went through this pandemic pump, which Vivid Voltage was the biggest beneficiary of that, or if you want to say not beneficiary, but took the biggest hit from that. That Rainbow Chunkachu in that set went absolutely crazy. People were scalping. I mean, people were literally offering their firstborn children in order to get Pokemon products because they could sell it for multiples of the MSRP. It was an absolute wild time. But even with all of that, I mean, think about this. This is December of 2021, and look at how these booster box prices and where they are. Now, the other thing that I wanted to be transparent about, and it's going to be the basis of our comparisons here, is MSRP has changed. And That matters, I think. So what I'm going to do throughout the course of this is we're going to look at where the booster box prices are now in comparison to MSRP. Are they above MSRP? Are they below MSRP? How much above and below are they? And I think that's going to give us the ability to do more of a like-for-like comparison, because I do think that it matters, and I do think that it affects the hobby. So that's the next slide that we're going to look at right here. And what we have here is the Scarlet and Violet booster boxes and their end of December price up top, and then obviously the Sword and Shield booster boxes and their end of December in 2021 prices. And how close or how far off are they to the MSRP of those different eras? And if you scroll all the way to the right with your eyes and you look really quickly, it is crazy to me to see the total value of Scarlet and Violet booster boxes over $200 more expensive now versus where we were in the Sword and Shield era. And I think, you know, people are just excited. I think a lot of people are bullish on the long-term prospects of Pokemon collecting and investing. I think there are more collectors in the hobby now than there were back then. And all of those are good things. But in reality, it is getting to be very hard to get these high quality sets at or below MSRP. And when you think about Journey Together coming out, and then the Glory of Team Rocket coming out, and Prismatic Evolutions, I mean, unless you have some kind of, I don't know, cheat code in order to try and get this at MSRP, you are going to have to pay over MSRP because it's just selling out instantaneously. So it has been fascinating to see what's going on in Scarlet and Violet. It is just a wild west out there right now. So the other thing that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to kind of do some more comparisons for this, was, you know, you got Scarlet and Violet and you got Sword and Shield base. And so I thought, you know, I'm not necessarily concerned with base sets. Base sets just, they don't necessarily do that great. They're not filled with a lot of, you know, home run type cards in it. You know, that's just the way for the Pokemon Company to start the era out. So I thought, why don't we pull those two out, right? I think Sword and Shield is propped up a little bit by the pandemic pump anyways. So I said, let's pull those out and see how these sets are comparing. And again, if you pull that out, guess what? The gap widens, right? Now you have the Scarlet and Violet era that is only 6% off from MSRP, and it gets even wider in the Sword and Shield era. And then I thought to myself one more time, I'm like, all right, well, let's pull the other set out that I think might have some direct pandemic pump effect, and that's the Rebel Clash one. Again, you see that one is positive, but if we're gonna pull Rebel Clash out, we also have to pull Paldea Evolved out, and that is one of the better performing sets from the Scarlet and Violet era, but you can't cherry pick it. You gotta do a 1-for-1, and I am a firm believer that Paldea Evolved is going to be a fantastic long-term buy and hold for the Scarlet and Violet era. I love that Magikarp at the very top. I love the Tyranitar card in there. Like, I just think Paldea Evolved has a very bright future, but it doesn't matter what I think. We're still going to pull them out to give us a comparison. And when you pull those two out, guess what? Look, the gap gets even wider for Sword and Shield, and the gap gets a little bit wider for Scarlet and Violet because we pulled out one of the sets that was right there near MSRP. But still, you're looking at these 6 sets down below for Sword and Shield are 33% below MSRP, where you have the 6 sets for the Scarlet and Violet era right there that are 7% below MSRP. And then I decided to take it one step further, okay? We all understand year 1 sets just traditionally don't tend to perform that well. So we really care about year 2 and year 3. If you look at Sun and Moon, if you look at Sword and Shield, if you look at, it seems like Scarlet and Violet, you know, that's where we seem to get some of our biggest and baddest sets out there, some sets that just deliver some of the awesomest cards and the great combinations and all of that. So I said, let's pull out these 2 earlier sets as well, and let's just look at year 2 sets. And this is where it got really interesting for me. And then again, here we are. I mean, the sum of the 4 sets in year 2 for Scarlet and Violet from a booster box price perspective is essentially flat to MSRP. It's only down 1%, which is just, you just didn't see that back in the day. If you look at Sword and Shield down below, it's sitting there at 36% below MSRP. You got Evolving Skies, which we all knew early on was going to be an awesome set, right? And Fusion Strike was the late set, the late regular set that came out in that 2021 year. So, you know, Evolving Skies had a couple of months under its belt before it finally got to this point. So Evolving Skies was at $106, Fusion Strike at $90, Chilling Reign at $92, Battle Style sitting there at $82. And I mean, you look at where the Scarlet and Violet sets are. I mean, Surging Sparks is $215. It's twice the price that Evolving Skies was at that current point in its life cycle. Same life cycle, same time, yet Surging Sparks is twice as expensive right now. You got Stellar Crown is sitting at $132, Twilight Masquerade at almost $160, Temporal Force is sitting at $133, another set that might be sneaky great. You got some really cool cards in there that are starting to gain some steam. So just really interesting to look at this. So then I said, okay, how did those Sword and Shield sets grow? Like, what did they do? So we knew where they were at in the 12th month of 2021. Where are they at today, and what kind kind of growth have they experienced? Well, you all know it has been absolutely insane. Evolving Skies is now at $973. You got Fusion Strike, which is knocking at the door of $400. Chilling Reign is at $250. It's kind of been holding that $250 line for a while. Battle Styles is at $134. I am a firm believer that when Battle Styles sells out on the Pokemon Center, I think the combination of its age, the combination it's got the Sleepy T-Tar in it, it's got some other high-priced cards in there as well comparatively. I think Battle Styles, I don't think it's going to be a huge set. I don't think it's going to put your kids through college someday, but I do think that there's going to be some strong returns in the short run for Battle Styles. But look at this. I mean, up 315%, up 818%, up 175%, and up 64% over the last 3 years for these 4 sets. And then I decided, why don't we do something that makes absolutely no sense in the world? It's totally nonsensical. It's totally for fun. This is not what's going to happen, I guarantee you. But I thought, what if we took these gains, these percentages, and we applied them to this middle era of Scarlet and Violet to say, hey, listen, if these perform the same way that these middle era Sword and Shield sets, again, they won't. We don't even know where these sets will end up ranking in terms of hierarchy for Scarlet and Violet because we don't even know all the sets for 2025 yet. But if they were to perform the same, what would the prices look like? And for me, this is just a great way to conceptualize exactly how big these numbers are and exactly how important your entry price is when it comes to buying these things. So this is what I did. I went ahead and I said, okay, Evolving Skies was the big dog back then. Surging Sparks is the big dog now. Let's put the percentage gain of Evolving Skies on Surging Sparks and figure out what it would be in December of 2027. Then Fusion Strike, I did that on Twilight Masquerade. Chilling Reign, I did on Stellar Crown. And Battle Styles, I did on Temporal Forces. And look at what those prices would do. Again, Evolving Skies today is at $973 a booster box. If we applied that same math, that same 818% growth to Surging Sparks in 3 years, that would be almost a $2,000 booster box. Now, that makes sense, right? If you look at it, the starting price for Surging Sparks is twice of what the starting price was for Evolving Skies, and so the end result is a little over twice of that. So math checks out. That makes sense. But again, if you look at all of these, is Twilight Masquerade going to be, a $60 box in 3 years? Probably not. I just don't see it happening, but it might be. All that matters is how much is produced and how high the demand is. Again, if Surging Sparks, if they don't release more into the hobby, if it ends up being a team up where there's one print run of it and then Pokemon Company's just like, hey, best of luck to all you guys, good luck, peace out, it could very well be a $2,000 booster box in the next 3 years. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but I don't know for sure. None of us know for sure. None of us know what goes on at the Pokemon Company International, but I did think this was a really interesting and a really fascinating comparison to kind of compare where the Scarlet and Violet booster boxes are compared to where Sword and Shield was. And this thing also highlights how important it is for the jumping off point, how important that entry point is. Now, do I think that we're going to see this same percentage of gains, for Scarlet and Violet? I don't. I think it's going to be muted to a little extent, but it is interesting to see, and it is an interesting comparison, and we can certainly understand that as we sit right now, the booster box prices are nowhere near where they were for the Sword and Shield era. There's no comparison. We're in a whole different set of parameters right now, and it's just something for us to understand as we move forward. So the other thing that I thought was incredibly important to talk about how different the market is performing and how things might never go back to the way they were was to look at the chase cards. So these are the 3 big chase cards from 3 of those big sets. You got the Blaziken, the Gengar, the Umbreon, obviously the card that needs no introduction, the Moonbreon down there. And what happened back in the Sword and Shield era, and we saw this pattern repeated time and time again, was these cards would go through what I called the Pokemon pop and flop, right? They would start off before the set came out at a ridiculously high price. And then as the set came out, as more packs were ripped, as that demand was met with more supply, right? The more packs that are ripped, more cards are injected into the market, they sell them, the demand starts to get met, and the price starts to come down. All of that makes logical sense. All of that is exactly what you would expect to happen. So, I mean, you look at the Gengar pre-sales, it was up at $187, and then, less than a year later, it was sitting at $88. And then you look at the Moonbreon, the big bad Moonbreon, right? In August, it was at $575, and then in July of 2022, it was still down at $275, even though you see it tried to work its way back up, but then it started coming back down again. And then the Blaziken came out hot as can be, $200 in June, and then July, almost a year later, it was all the way down to $88. So you had this opportunity to kind of to sit back and watch, right? These chase cards would come out, these awesome sets would come out. You had this big window of opportunity to buy these amazing booster boxes and to pick up these cards that we all knew were going to be the big chase cards of the set, but you had time to let the price drop and then you could buy it at an approachable price point. Well, what are we seeing now? So I took the 3 big chase cards that we have from those sets over there. These are the 3 biggest ones in terms of price, and you know, Surging Sparks is brand new, so it's a real hard comparison to do that. But that Pikachu Special Illustration Rare was going for like $375 pre-sale, and then now it's up at $423. I mean, it is still up, and again, it's super early. Came out in November, and here we are in early January. But this card doesn't seem to have any sign of slowing down. There is no pop, there's no flop. It just seems like this thing continues to hold that price line at $420. And then talk about a pop with no flop. Look at the Greninja on the lower left hand corner. It came out at $123. It has steamrolled its way all the way up to $314. Every time this card would start to wobble or work its way down, in my mind I'm like, here it is, Greninja's going to come down. Like I feel it in my bones, and every time I'm wrong. Every time the market responds with scooping up more copies and driving the price higher. And then, you know, down there you got Raging Bolt, which in the long run I don't think is going to be one of the best cards out there, but when you look at how the price has performed, it came out at $77 and now it's at $97, and I know there's some playability that factors into that as well, but it is just interesting to see the difference in the way the booster boxes started off and the way the booster boxes are starting off for Scarlet and Violet. It's fascinating to me to see we went through that Pokemon pop and flop, right, where the demand was super high and then it was met with the supply, and then we would see singles cards coming down, and we're just not seeing that in the Scarlet and Violet era. So I don't know what all this means. You know, I say this all the time. My crystal ball is broken. It's never worked for me as long as I've been in this space. All I know is I always try and buy the best quality products that I can at a price that I feel comfortable with. And if I believe Surging Sparks is going to be a great booster box 5 years down the road, then I don't have a problem paying $200 for it. How many of us wish we could go back and buy Evolving Skies booster boxes at $200 a pop? If we had that opportunity, we would buy every single one we could possibly afford because we have hindsight and know, hey, listen, it's now almost $1,000 booster box, so we all would do that. And it just doesn't mean that the market isn't going to gain. It doesn't mean that, you know, we're too frothy right now. It does mean that the returns from a percentage perspective might be muted versus where they were in Sword and Shield. But guess what? If you look at those percentage gains, like that's unsustainable, right? I promise you, it's not sustainable anyway. So it is a very different market. It is a very different era. And my commitment to everybody out there is to continue to bring as much data as I can so that when we spend our hard-earned money, I know how hard you work for yours. I know how hard I work for mine. We can lay our head down at night knowing that we made the best decision that we possibly could. Doesn't mean we'll always be right, but it does mean we can feel good with the work we put in before we decided to pull the trigger on any purchases. So fascinating video, fascinating information. I can't wait to see what 2025 has to bring. And again, I gotta say it, if you had fun in this video, if you enjoyed the content, if you're a data head like me, hit that subscribe button, and if you really appreciate it, give us a thumbs up. I can't thank you enough. I hope you have an epic one, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.